Welcome back, guys, to Fish Scales and Shrimp Tails. I'm going to preface this whole video by saying I am still quite sick, and I apologize for any coughing or sniffling that I do during this video. I'll try very hard not to do that. I've already recorded this video once or twice before, and in editing realized just how many times I was coughing or sniffling and just I couldn't listen to it myself. I'm not going to make you guys listen to that. So I'm going to try very hard not to be coughing or sniffling throughout this whole video and retake it. I want to share with you my experience with the Snowball shrimp tank. Thought I would do an update. I've had a couple of people ask how the tank is going. And as much as I enjoy sharing with you my successes, it is also important for me to share with you my failures so that you don't make the same mistakes. Now, the mistakes I've made with this tank weren't catastrophic. They weren't a complete failure. They were mistakes that I made that can be corrected. They've just led to the tank being in a bit of an ugly spot right now. So I'm going to zoom out right now. I've dropped a little bit of food in here, and for once, my snowball shrimp have come out in numbers to say hello. So I'll get back to them in just a second, but I'm going to zoom out, and you're going to see the color here change as the camera adjusts. And I want to zoom out and do a quick pan of the tank so you can see where we're at. Now, you're going to notice right off the bat, the tank is very heavily tanned. You'll also notice if you watch last video that there's a piece of driftwood that isn't here anymore. That's because I've taken a lot of these, I believe these are Ludwigias, red Ludwigias or super something or other reds. I've cut them all down into little pieces like I did on the beginner tank and dropped them all in behind the driftwood and the rocks here. I realized I didn't really leave enough planting room in this tank with this whole middle space open. And I've had a number of plants die, which is what we're going to get to. So just a quick pan around the tank. You're going to see just how yellow this tank is. And this is what part of the problem was. Now, you probably won't believe it if I tell you, but in fact, this tank is significantly lighter than it was just a couple of weeks ago. I don't typically do water changes, but I did in fact do two 25% water changes on this tank over the course of the last month or so. I don't typically do big water changes one right after another, especially in a shrimp tank, so I'm doing it very slowly. I need to bring the tannin level down in this tank. And this is one of the things we're going to talk about. As good as tannins are, if you're not paying attention, you can also create a bit of an issue. So guys, the tank is very healthy. The shrimp are breeding. Everything there is fine. My problem was lighting, and I did it to myself. This tank is maybe four months old. Maybe not even that, but about 4 months old. I started to have an algae issue shortly after I set it up. And I tried to battle that by dropping the light levels, as anyone probably would. And I reduced fertilizer. In fact, that's part of the reason I don't fertilize my tanks very much anymore at all. In fact, I try very hard not to ever fertilize them. Because I dropped the light down, I allowed a bit of a problem to begin that sort of started down a circular path right down the drain, to be honest. I had some string algae develop in the Java moss. In fact, I still have string algae in Java moss. That's just how that goes for me. I also started to develop algae on the anubias leaves and other areas of the tank, so I dropped my lighting down. Dropping the lighting down looked like it had started to take care of it, and I kind of stopped paying close attention to the tank. It's not that I wasn't watching it, I guess I wasn't watching it with a critical enough eye. And a few things started to happen. I dropped my light down to about 25% on this tank. I allowed the floaters to continue to grow to a point where they covered almost the entirety of the tank. And I allowed the tannin level to get to a rather high level. Now, it didn't, objectively, honestly, it didn't look to me like the plants weren't getting enough light. But the tank was quite dark. In fact, if I remember in editing, I'll post a picture up right now of what the tank looked like the last time I filmed it, so that you can sort of have an objective view of that for yourself. And you'll see that the tank, the tannin level even, was significantly darker than it is right now. So between the high tannin level, the reduced light, and the fact that the floaters kind of overtook the tank, it caused the plants that I had in this tank to suffer and begin to die. In fact, I've lost a number of them. If I pan around here, if I go over to the side, you'll see there's a crypt here that's never really done very well. It's never recovered well. If I go back to where the shrimp are and you look in the background, you'll see there's 2 or 3 leaves sticking out of the ground of what's left of a crypt there that never took off. And if I go further back here, in between the 2 rocks, you'll see there's a leaf or 2 sticking out. That's also a crypt. Now, those are just the 3 in the foreground. There were crypts that were planted in behind a lot of the driftwood over here. There were crypts that are planted in behind here, and the idea was that they would come up and sort of over, and they never really took off. And the reason was the lighting, and it was entirely my making. So here's what happened. When I reduced the lighting, the tannins continued to leach out of the wood. Now, I thought I had got most of the tannins out. I left them sit in a bucket for a few days. This wood was bought from Amazon. It's not Amazon's fault. It's not the seller's fault. This is on me. This is the idiot that wasn't paying attention. So the wood continued to leach tannins into the tank. The lighting level I decreased, and the floaters continued to multiply. Those 3 things caused the plants that were in here, excuse me, to die back and suffer. Now, part of the problem was most of the plants I had in here were red. My intention was to have almost a black water, maybe not that dark, but a black water-ish tank with red plants. I thought it would look really cool, and I still think it would. But because they're red plants, they require a higher intensity of light. And those 3 things dropped the lighting level down here to such a point where they started to drop leaves and die. Now, I look at my tanks probably every day, but unfortunately, I wasn't really looking at this one objectively. I thought I was battling algae, and I kind of thought I was doing the right thing because I was winning the battle against the algae. Problem was, as my plants were dying, it was allowing the nutrient level in the tank to rise because the plants are no longer taking the nutrients up. That created its own issues. I started to see a nitrate, I'm not going to call it a spike, but just an uptick in those nutrients. Excuse me again. Because I ended up with a higher level of nitrates, I started getting algae back. And we just kind of went down this circular pattern right down the toilet hole until I realized what was going on. And as soon as I did, I pulled almost all of the floaters out of the tank, increased my light up to about 50%, and decided I needed to do something about the tannins. And I started with a 25% water change. I'm sorry, guys, I'm really trying not to cough. I started with a 25% water change 1 week, and then I waited probably 3 weeks before I did the next one. That was maybe last week. I intend to do that twice more to try and flush out some of these tannins. But you can see it just sort of ended up in a circular pattern. I reduced the light, and then the floaters grow in, and the plants start to die, and that allows more nutrients into the water, which allows the algae to come back, and around the circle we go. Now that I've increased the light in the tank, and I've removed most of the floaters, we're starting to see growth again. We're starting to see a healthier tank. So although the tank is in an ugly spot right now, it is healthy again. And I'm not sure that it ever wasn't not healthy. The other thing I had to watch is when I pulled all the floaters out of the water, I had to continue to monitor the tank for ammonia and nitrites, because those floaters were doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it came to filtration. It never really became an issue, but it's worth mentioning so that if you're experiencing the same problems, you understand if you pull out a big bunch of those floaters, you're going to need to pay attention to your water parameters, because that could really impact it dramatically and quickly. So I do have that under control again, but it did put us in kind of an ugly position. I also had a couple of deaths in the tank. The albino cory, I have three, or had three in here. One of the albino cories I got from the store, as it turned out, as time went on, I started to realize that he had what I would typically call in a guppy a bent spine issue. His tail started to bend at a very awkward 45-degree angle away from his body, and I believe that's what eventually led to his death. I also had an autocinklus in here disappear on me. Never did find him. I think it was probably something I did in the tank. I took some driftwood out and moved some rocks a little bit in here, and I almost wonder if maybe I didn't catch him in some of that movement, and that's why I didn't see him after that point. The interesting thing is, and it's worth mentioning, in a heavily planted tank, especially one with shrimp and snails in it, I never saw that ammonia spike. I never saw that issue with a fish being in the tank that is decomposing that you don't take out. Typically that will create problems. In a tank that's heavily planted with this many omnivores in a tank, it just simply didn't happen. He just simply got absorbed back into the whole ecosystem and never really did create a problem. On the good side of the scale, as far as tannins go, and one of the reasons that I like to keep tannins, and I'm going to zoom out here to show you something. Over here by this Anubis, and it's difficult to see, but just under here, it's almost a little tiny cave structure. It's not very big. The cories try to get in here all the time, and that's what led to a bit of a problem. The big female cory I have in here, whom I'm affectionately referred to as Dum Dum. If you've watched the other videos, you'll understand why. She got herself, and I think it was in that cave, although I don't know, but I noticed when I came down here one day, she had a big wound, sort of scar on her side, and I see her try to get into that cave pretty often. And I'm pretty sure that in her ambition to get in there, she ruined a lot of her scales, and she rather gouged herself pretty deep. It was a rather ugly spot. I was a little concerned about it. Now, I didn't put anything in this tank. I didn't put any medicine in this tank. I didn't put any salt in it. I left it be. She looked okay. You know, other than the wound, she looked okay. She wasn't breathing heavily. She didn't look stressed. The tannins in this tank prevented that wound from getting any kind of infection, any bacterial, fungus, viral infections. She just simply went about her business and slowly healed up. And if she was around, I'd try and show you the scar that was left on her, but she's kind of a skittish little fish lately, and when she does come out, she's a bit of a spaz. But it did leave a scar. It was that big a wound. Never did create an issue. So that's a plus side to the tannins. And like I said, I like to share my successes and my failures with you so that if you are experiencing an issue with algae and you're trying to battle it, keep these things in mind. Watch your tannin levels. Watch how many floaters you have in the tank. Keep an eye on your plants, especially your red plants. They're going to be the first ones to suffer if you drop your lighting down too much. Now, the algae issue in this tank has pretty much gone away. I still have string algae, and I'll show you that here. The Java moss, you know how much I like Java moss, is still got a problem here. What I'm probably going to end up doing is I'm probably going to completely remove that Java moss, except for maybe a clean piece or two that I can find, and I'll reattach it and try to regrow it, because I'm not sure. I've already peeled the string algae out of there several times. You can see there's a lot less Java moss there than there used to be, and I still haven't managed to get rid of the string algae, so we're going to have to get a little bit more dramatic. With regards to the shrimp, doesn't seem like they ever suffered any issues in here. Now remember, when I started this tank, if you watched the previous video, you'll know I had a bit of a catastrophe, and I started this tank with probably 10 shrimp or less. Only 3 of which were mature females that were capable of reproducing at the time. I would estimate now, and it's very hard to show you because my shrimp don't typically come out for food. This is one of the first times that I've got this many shrimp to come out for food, but most of them just continue to graze on the biofilm and whatever else is around the tank. Not to mention the fact that these shrimp are essentially clear. They blend in with the environment so well that you can stare at a plant they're sitting on and not even see them there. So I would estimate with the 3 mature females I had, in a course of probably 4 months is how old this tank is, I would suggest to you there are probably 60 shrimp in this tank. And many of the young shrimp that I had when I bought them, or that are growing up in this tank, are now developing saddles. And I'll carefully lift it off, and I'll see if I can't show you here, guys. There's one there. She's getting her saddle. I don't know if there's any down here feeding. It seems like my females don't come out for food. But there's probably a couple in there. Like I said, guys, it's so hard. The first time I filmed this, you can see there's one up on the filter over here. There's a couple smaller ones up top, all the way up there. Like I said, that they're not, my shrimp just aren't interested in store-bought food. I'm not sure why. I don't know what their deal is, but they just don't seem to care as much. But there are a number of females in here that are developing saddles. So I suspect over the course of the next couple of months, we're probably going to see a lot more baby shrimp in here than we do right now. And there are some shrimp in here that are probably not more than 2 or 3 weeks old. I was looking at them last night and I saw a couple this morning, but when I went to film them, they've all disappeared. But they're really quite tiny, so I know that somebody in here has recently dropped eggs within the last couple of weeks. So we're still having shrimp born in here. So the tank is still very healthy, regardless of the issues I had with lighting. So that's a very positive thing. And I think to get, 60 shrimp or so out of 3 adult females in a period of about 4 months or so is not too bad an average, to be perfectly honest. And I imagine that will only continue to grow numbers from this point forward, now that I have several more females in here that are maturing. The tank has been very good, very solid, no real big issues. I have had to plant some plants in here that I otherwise wouldn't have, to sort of take over for the plants that I've lost. You can see I've put this water wisteria, water sprite. I know, guys, at this point, you may have already mentioned in the comments what this stuff is actually called. Please do remember, I do film a number of these well in advance. So if you have told it to me already in the comments, believe me, in any future videos I make after I've been told, I'll make sure I use the right terminology. For now, like I said, I'm still not sure what that is. But I've put those in there just to sort of, I'm not sure if I'm going to leave it or if I'm going to try to go back to getting this tank to an all red by propagating the red plants that are in here. But for now, I needed something in here that will start to soak up those nutrients that are otherwise not being absorbed by the water lettuce and the other plants that are in here. Sorry, guys. Anyhow, tank has been really healthy. No major issues other than the lighting, which, like I said, was quite entirely my fault. The tannin level is still very high, although I will slowly try to correct that. I don't want to do major water changes to a tank that is otherwise healthy. It's a visual thing for me at this point, and I will slowly bring it down. But I don't want to make dramatic changes because the shrimp in here are still doing very well. Anyways, guys, I do hope that you've enjoyed the video. I hope that even in my own failures, I have managed to teach you something that will help you with your own tanks, whether it be now or in the future. In any case, guys, I've really enjoyed this. As I've said in previous videos, really didn't expect this kind of response. It's been really fantastic that you guys continue to tune in every week to listen to some old man in his basement talk about fish and shrimp. I think that's fantastic. I hope you guys enjoy these videos. I hope I've taught you something. I will talk to you in the next video, and hopefully by then I am feeling better and I can stop coughing all the way through these. Until next time, guys, take care.